Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second OT Empower Hour. Second week, I'm so excited. And we're getting into the geeky stuff now. We are totally gonna rock Polyvagal Theory. So I'm just gonna wait a few seconds here while some people jump on. This is like a totally new live format, protocol, dashboard, however you want to call it. And it's tricky. I can't quite tell. Dana says, great topic. So I cannot tell who's on. And that could be the fact that I don't really know what I'm doing on social media, or it could have to do with the fact that they don't make it super easy anymore. So my ask of everybody who's on is if you could please do a shout out like Amelia and Dana. Hey guys, thank you. I'm so glad you're here. Give me a little shout out. Let me know you're here. Erica, yes, I'm so glad. Julie, what's up, girl? Give me a little shout out. Just say hello. And if you're so inclined, let me know if you use polyvagal. Let me know if you're familiar with it. Let me know if you've read books about it, if you've read an article, if you're using it in practice. I'm a newbie. I'm a newbie when it comes to it. I have been studying it for a couple years now, but it's fairly complex. It's beautiful. It's so relevant for pelvic health, but it's an evolving practice. So part of the reason why I've chosen this topic today is that I'm fascinated by it. I find it so incredibly relevant and I want to learn more. And that's what these OT Empower Hours are all about. It's a chance for our community to get together and learn more. Dana, so happy you're here. So Lisa, yes. So if anybody can just give me a shout out, let me know you're here. If this is a replay for you, please write replay. It's so helpful for me to know that you're here, that you're watching, and when you watched it. Was it the live? Was it the replay? It's really helpful for me to kind of go back in and take a look at those things because this is a new series for us. And Jean, thank you for sharing that Ginger Gardner is a great resource. That is awesome. This is exactly what I'm looking for. So we're going to pull resources together. We're going to have a discussion. I have a few things that I'm going to share with you guys today, but then let's make this as much of a community conversation as possible. So people like Jean said, Ginger Gardner, if you know of anybody, if you have any books, let's bring it to the table and let's get this conversation started. Hey Brid, I'm so glad you're here. You asked a great question on the post earlier today, and we're going to get into that as well. So I love that the people that are joining us are from such a variety of backgrounds, and that's going to be really helpful because what unites us is pelvic floor health, but our backgrounds are so diverse. So I think that's going to help inform us. The question that Britt asked in particular, I actually don't have any experience in, and her question related more to brain injury. So we're going to get to that, and I'm hoping that someone here who's joining us, that's their wheelhouse, and they can help us understand the role of polyvagal with brain injury. But let's dive into what I have planned for us to talk about today, and then we can absolutely start the conversation. But as you guys know, post questions throughout. I mean, this is totally meant to be a community conversation. So you just keep on posting your questions. So I'm super curious if, okay, Amelia says, Michelle Emanuel educated about polyvagal as it relates to infants. Awesome. Oh, that's incredible. See, that's an entire field that I know nothing about, infants and polyvagal. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. So the way I like to think about polyvagal is that it's really a roadmap for understanding the nervous system, right? It's a roadmap for understanding the nervous system, which is a really beautiful idea, right? Because when we have a roadmap, we can start to wrap our heads around it a little bit more, and we can help our clients wrap their heads around it just a little bit more. And then we start to really get into incredible treatment and incredible empowerment and education. So as you guys know, the autonomic nervous system is made up of both the parasympathetic and the sympathetic, right? And the parasympathetic, as we all may remember from OT school, is the rest and digest regulator, right? And when it's stimulated, it increases motility of the gut, right? Relaxes the heart, relaxes breathing. It produces production of serotonin, stimulates the urge to have a bowel movement. And then we have our sympathetic system, which is really more of like our fight or flight. So we have autonomic nervous system, we have our parasympathetic, and we have our sympathetic, okay? Now, the 10th cranial nerve is the vagus nerve, and it's part of the autonomic nervous system, okay? Now, the vagus nerve is the main input of parasympathetic activity into our bodies. The pathway exits from the mandibles, goes down through the sternocleidomastoid, SCM, and the scalenes, right by the clavicle, and it dives into the thoracic cavity and basically disperses throughout our visceral organs. Already we can see the implication of pelvic health, right? Like, incredible. Everything from excitatory breathing, neck breathing, chest breathing. Jenica, you wish you could stay. Catch the replay. There is the replay after this. So fast forward up to the point that you've joined. And by the way, it's your jam. So let's get you back on here. I'd love to talk with you about it and fill in some gaps because I'm a lifelong learner and I'm still learning so much. So thank you for being here. So we know that when we get into that, accessory breathing, that chest breathing, we're already putting pressure and we're already impacting the vagus nerve from where it originates, up by the sternocleidomastoid, the scalenes, all of that, right? And if it goes into the thoracic cavity and disperses to visceral organs, again, has so much implication on digestion, on elimination, on breathing, because of it going into that thoracic area, right? Okay. Now, the name vagus itself means wandering nerve because it wanders all throughout the body. If you took a look at that image, if you guys are on my newsletter list, I sent out an image today of it. You can also quickly Google it now. It's this incredible web of a nerve. And the way I remember it is vagus is like vagabond, right? A wanderer. So vagus nerve, vagabond. I also like to think of it as the inner referee that breaks up the fight or flight response, right? The term trust your gut comes from the vagus nerve, which sends emotional signals from the gut to the brain. Great. Jenica says that she recommends this PT's course for a deep dive into some great decompression exercises. Awesome. Melanie Weller, this is fantastic. I think Melanie's name came up in one of our COVID and collaboration conversations over the summer that we were hosting. And so I'm so glad to see her name again because that was on the back of my mind as someone to research. Now we are going to get a little bit into exercises today, later on in our live, but I love that you brought this up because I'm sure she goes into so many more exercises that I'm unfamiliar with and that we can always learn more. So thank you so much for that resource. Okay, so again, that term, trust your gut, comes from the vagus nerve, which sends that emotional signals from the gut to the brain. Again, gut health, right? Such a buzz term right now, so incredibly helpful. We're recognizing its role in depressive behaviors. So again, so much relevance in mental wellness, so much relevance in pelvic health. Thanks, Brooke. Yes, love. If you don't mind, Brooke, as we're talking, share with us how you're integrating this stuff into your practice, because this is where we're going to really move from theory into practice, right? Into how we're actually using this stuff. Because if you're like me, I love geeking out on this stuff and I can spend days doing that. But what we really want to focus on and what's really relevant is how we bridge that into practice. How do we take that geeky stuff that we can spin out about and actually make it relevant to our clients? So if you could just give me one or two just like really quick examples on ways that you integrate that. And I'm actually asking that to everyone. So if anyone else is listening, and I can't actually see the number of people on here, again, the live dashboard is super weird. Let me know just a quick sentence or two, because This is what's going to fuel the conversation. It's going to take it out of my limited experience and into this community, which is exactly what we want. Also, if you're joining us on the replay, please write replay. And if you haven't introduced yourself yet, just please quickly say hi so I know you're there, because again, I can't see anyone's who's joining unless they post a comment. Okay. So the polyvagal theory really gives us insight into how we find safety, right? How we find connections with others, or alternatively, how we shut down, how we kind of go into fight or flee responses. Now, this is where we're going to get a little bit geeky, so hang with me. There are actually two branches of the vagus nerve that have two very different functions. And they originate in two locations, hence their name. So the name is ventral and dorsal, the ventral and dorsal branch of the vagus nerve. Welcome, Sarah. The ventral nerve innervates the throat muscles, the lungs, and basically everything above the diaphragm. It pulls us out of fight or flight when we feel safe. It lowers the heart rate. Then we have the dorsal branch, which innervates more of the visceral organs below the diaphragm. So ventral's in the front of the body, innervates everything above the diaphragm. Our dorsal is in the back, and it innervates everything below the diaphragm. Now this one is super interesting because it has two gears. It has two gears. It has a high tone gear and it has a low tone gear, depending on the state of the person or the situation, okay? It's responsible for shutdown or rest and digest. Low tone is kind of this easy, this calm state of being. It's like what we want to be in when we're sleeping. Welcome, Megan. So glad you're here. It's what we want to be in when we're sleeping. It's what we want to be in when we're lounging around. It's what we want to be in our downtime, right? Super important to have that balance. And one way we can refer to it, which I think is a really important distinction between that low tone and high tone of the dorsal branch, is that it's called immobilization without fear, okay? Immobilization without fear. Thinking about it again, easy, calm, lounging, relaxing. Now the high tone is more of that kind of shock or freeze or shutdown mode. This goes directly from the brainstem to the viscera, and we can see why, right? Like if a surge of activity happens in that dorsal branch, it's kind of like a defensive strategy that causes that shutdown to help us cope with trauma, real or imagined. And that's really important. It doesn't matter if it's real or imagined. It is that physiological response to help us cope with trauma. Another thing that's really important and relevant to our modern society is that when we remain in this state, when we remain in this state and there's no longer a threat, staying in this state really robs us of clarity, joy, productivity. Again, this one is called immobilization with fear. So we have the low tone immobilization without fear. We have the high tone immobilization with fear. Okay? Is everyone with me? Just give me a little shout out. Give me a question before we move on, because this was sort of like the nitty gritty geeky stuff. Before we move on, I want to make sure we're cool. So I'm gonna just wait a second, take a drink of my water. Let me know if you guys have any questions. If you haven't introduced yourself, please do. Just quickly, where your name, maybe where you're from, and if you use this stuff, and give us a practical example of how you use this, integrate it with your clients. All right. So great. Awesome, guys. If you have any questions, keep writing them. I'll make sure to jump to them. But I'm going to move on to the next part that I want to discuss, which is kind of another geeky thing, but I think you guys are going to find this interesting. That ventral branch that we talked about, it's myelinated, which basically makes things faster, polished, more refined, right? The dorsal branch, it's not. It's not myelinated. But what's even more interesting is that when we're born, the ventral is non-myelinated. So the question becomes, why does it become, what makes it and why does it become myelinated? Why would that ventral branch do that? How would it do that if that's such a pivotal part? Well, a secure caregiver that is attuned to us as children. So this is where the person who is familiar with pediatrics, this is exactly what I thought about right when that OT mentioned it. Let's see, Amelia mentioned Michelle Emanuel. So this is, I would love to learn more about this aspect of polyvagal theory, because when we have that secure caregiver that's attuned to us, it teaches us to self-soothe, demonstrates connection for us. That's what makes that ventral branch become myelinated. And I find that fascinating. And what's also interesting is that we see less PTSD response when this connection is well polished. So our system is more resilient to trauma recovery when we have a myelinated ventral branch. I don't know about you guys, but I find that so fascinating. Like, I want to go down this rabbit hole of understanding. And again, like I can totally go down that research loop, but what I try to do, and this is really important to me, is to bridge it to how we can make this relevant to our clients and how we can make this alive for them, make this relevant for them, make this part of, as what Megan says, integrating it into the practice, right? And not have it be this heady stuff, which I love. So I have to give a shout out now to Stephen Porges, if I'm saying his name right. It's I'll type it in the comments so you guys see it. So that's the guy. It's actually Stephen with an E. Sorry, Stephen Porges. So Stephen Porges developed the polyvagal theory. It was like 1991 or 1994. Amelia says the ventral vagus turns on with social engagement and safety with communication with the infant. Super important to engage this. Fantastic, fantastic. I'd love to know, Amelia, like, do we know, so I read about that PTSD connection, you know, that if that myelination, that safety isn't turned on, like, do we know anything else about what happens if that attachment doesn't happen besides the PTSD link? I'd love to know more about that. Anything related to depressive behavior, anything like that. Not to put any pressure on you, but you seem to have a little bit of knowledge about this, and I just love learning as much as I can. Okay, so it was like 1991, 1994 when the polyvagal theory came out, and it's pretty fascinating. So it's like over 20 years old, but we're still learning so much about it, and we're continuing to take those theories and apply them to what we continue to learn about the brain, because we've also learned so much more about the brain since 20 years ago. So thanks to Stephen, we have some really new ways of looking at all this, and we continue to look at this. And the old theory prior, right, just had us look at sympathetic and parasympathetic, right? So the fight or flight or flee versus the rest, digest, feed, and breed. Polyvagal theory shows us there are two distinct vagal nerves that originate in two different locations, right? And it also shared with us that there are three neural circuits that support different types of behavior, okay? So this is what's really making this whole theory really novel. So the three neural circuits within the polyvagal theory are responsible for overall regulation to maintain homeostasis, right? So let's go over those three now. They are immobilization. This is that slow down, shut down, kind of those depressive, withdrawn behaviors that we may see. We have mobilization, which is acting to move, right? So this is like that fight or flight, but it's also the energy to get up in the morning, the kind of like pulse to exercise, to have interest in going and to like move forward. Okay. And then we have social engagement. This is not part of rest and digest. This is more of like those positive states of relaxation, connection, communication, and social engagement. Okay. Now, polyvagal theory also presents yet another dimension with understanding our autonomic nervous system. And it not only regulates our inner organs, but these three circuits also relate back to our emotional states, which in turn drive our behavior, right? It's this whole chicken and egg thing, which I love. And prior to polyvagal theory, depressive behaviors really lacked a psychological model in terms of the nervous system. And I think that's really important, right? So another way to look at it would be like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. If the bed is too hard, we kind of get into fight or flight and we mobilize very, very quickly. If the bed is too soft, we kind of shut down. We get into those more depressive behaviors. And if Goldilocks' vagus nerve bed is just right, we can participate in social engagement, right? And it's so interesting because, as I'm sure you guys do this as well, anytime I'm studying something, I think about clients, I think about my former clients, but I'm also thinking about the world and the state of the world in general. And so when I'm thinking about social engagement, I'm also thinking about the pandemic that we're all in right now, right? And whether we're introverted or extroverted, we all have seen a major drop off in our social engagement. So I'm thinking a lot about this theory in terms of how it's impacting not even our zest for wanting to participate, but from the fact that we can't participate, right? So we talked about like that mobilization and that zest and that getting up and going. But what about if we can't? So it becomes this external force that's being placed over that experience. And I wonder how that impacts this whole system. So Vanya, I hope I'm saying your name right. It's beautiful. Vanya is an OT from Norway. Welcome. She says she loves this topic. She can recommend Eddie Stern's book, One Simple Thing. It touches on the vagus nerve and how yoga practices can help strengthen tone, posture, breath. And he also references Porges. Absolutely. Porges is the father. That's fantastic. There's a book that I really recommend too. I'm gonna grab it for you guys. It's the author is Stanley Rosenberg. It's a really simple name. I'm gonna find it for you guys before, or I'll at least post it on the notes afterwards. But I love this. We already have some really great tools. We have Eddie Stern's One Simple Thing. We have the course by Melanie Weller that goes into some great decompression exercises for the vagus. We have Michelle Emanuel talks about polyvagal as it relates to infants, and then Jean mentions Ginger Gardner. Awesome. So guys, this is like, I love this. I love this. I love the community. I love what these OT and Power Hours, what it brings out in all of us, because we can only serve to be better practitioners and better OTs in pelvic health every time we get together like this. So I'm really grateful you're here. Okay, so getting back to some of the other things that I wanted to mention were that these states that we talk about, you're reading the Stanley Rosenberg work. Yay, Megan, that's awesome. Did we talk about that? That's so cool. If you have the title handy nearby, would you mind typing it in? I'm happy to look it up as well, but if it's easy. So the states that we just talked about, the shutdown, the social engagement, and the like fight or flight mobilization, they're not voluntary, okay? The nervous system picks up on these states. It's not happening at a cognitive level. I think that's really important. It's not happening at a cognitive level. And our nervous system basically puts us in these states, right? So for a lot of reasons, it's just important to know that it's not volitional, right? And it basically serves as a reminder that our physical and emotional well-being are really intimately connected. And again, why we never should be looking purely at the physical body. we should never be looking at the purely physical body because the emotional and physical well-being are so connected. I know you guys know this. We talk about this in OT Pioneers. We've talked about this on this OTs for Pelvic Health all the time, but especially with pelvic health, it's never just the physical body. So again, this is why this stuff is so darn interesting. So Megan says I recommended it to her. Okay, I don't remember that. And then I should be an affiliate for Amazon. Welcome, Jessica. You were playing from the beginning. When you catch up, hopefully we'll still be online. And if you have any questions, you can catch us. So please make sure to mention, introduce yourself wherever you are, whether you're a replay or watching this live, and let us post any recommendations you have. We're compiling a list and it's awesome so far. Okay. So now let's get a little bit into how we test these branches and exercises that we use. So I'm super curious looking at Melanie Weller's stuff because she probably has so many more resources. But I'm going to present you with a few, some of which actually come from the Stanley Rosenberg book that Megan and I are talking about. So one of the ways we can test the ventral branch is by facial observation, right? Facial observation. So looking for things like raised eyebrows, eyes, are they open? Are they relaxed? Are they tightened, right? Is your client squinting? Because when we do these behaviors, it's sending signals about cutting down light, about visual input narrowing, right? And we're basically emotionally not seen. We're withdrawn, right? So you know that phrase, it was a real eye opener, right? Like when you're coming into new information, new knowledge, it was an eye-opening experience, right? That's kind of where some of this stuff comes from. And when the eyes are open, the ears actually hear better. So all of our senses are attuned and present, and again, socially engaged. So even just simply paying attention to the facial expression of your client, you're starting to get into some of this information, right? Now, the next thing I want to bring up is the uvula. I hope I'm saying that right. You guys know the uvula when you open your mouth and you've got that part of the throat that's hanging down in the center. When you basically open up your mouth and you say, ah, 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 like that, you're going to see the uvula. I hate that word. I cannot say it right. It's a tongue twister for me. When you're going to see it move, ideally it moves up symmetrically. If it moves one way or the other, it's actually giving you some information. And Stanley Rosenberg's book, which Megan so kindly wrote the title of, it's called Assessing the Healing Power of the Vagus Nerve, Self-Help Exercises for Anxiety, Trauma, and Autism, goes into it. I'm going to grab the book in a moment because I want to show you guys the directions that the uvula could go in, okay, and sort of how that's relevant and what information that gives us, okay. Another really interesting exercise, and this also comes from Stanley's book, is what we call the basic exercise. Now, this exercise is something I actually use with most of my clients, and it's something that I use before we ever get into our physical work together. So before I do any hands-on, internal, external, it doesn't matter, especially if I sense that they have a hyper-aroused system, I'll have them do this basic exercise, okay? So let's walk you through that now. You basically take your hands and clasp them, and you just put them behind your head, okay? So you're just gonna put them on the back of the cranium, the back of the head, and ultimately you're lying down doing this. You can totally do this sitting up as you get better, but I recommend you do it lying down with your hands clasped and your hands on the back of your neck. The reason for this is you're going to move your eyes first to the right, and a lot of people, when they look to the right, they turn their head, and you basically want to keep that head straight, stacked on top of your spine. So the other reason, so you're anchoring your hands so that you're anchoring your cranium on your hand so that you don't want to turn your head so much. The other reason I like it is because it'll put your spine in alignment with your neck in line with your spine. Most of us, because we have kind of a tightened front and a stretched back, when we lie down flat without a pillow, our chin is really jutted forward. So having our hands clasped behind our head will put our head in better alignment, and you'll understand why that's important in just a moment. Okay, so here you are lying on your back with your hands clasped behind your head, keeping your head straight. You're simply going to turn your eyes to the right, and you're just going to keep it there for 30 seconds to like a minute. You're basically waiting for a spontaneous nervous system response. This could be a yawn. This could be a swallow. This could be feeling your heart just kind of slow down, your heart rate slow down, just any sort of parasympathetic response. And it will happen spontaneously. Just be patient, allow it to happen, okay? Once it happens, keep your hands behind your head, bring your eyes straight again, just for a couple seconds, and now look to the left, okay? Usually the left side happens more quickly after the right, and the same kind of thing will happen. Some sort of parasympathetic response, yawning, swallowing, heart rate slowing, or just a feeling of calmness and wellness will happen, okay? So that's called the basic exercise, and it basically serves to enhance social engagement. It increases blood flow to the brainstem where the 5 cranial nerves are. And it also kind of helps C1 and C2 better align. So a lot of us who have that forward neck posture, we're changing that blood flow, and that really does change our nervous system state. So that's a really lovely way to help that. Welcome, Sarah. No worries. I'm glad that you're here, and glad you're interested in this topic. Okay. So, I want to talk, we're going to go into a couple more exercises, but I want to just mention that this theory is really important to better understand healing trauma, right? And to restore healing to the nervous system. When we have trauma trapped in the system, we kind of live in one of two states. We're either super hypervigilant, or we're in this freeze dorsal kind of shutdown, that high tone that we talked about earlier, right? And it's the revving of the survival stress in the system, right? And we're trying to protect basically through that shutdown response. We want to stay here for minutes, not decades, right? And again, this is that high tone state. To heal, we need to spark that social engagement, that connection with the environment, with the self. We can call it like our orienting response. Actively facilitating more re-engagement with the community, okay? So let's talk now about a couple more exercises. So remember I mentioned earlier that the vagus nerve comes through the mandibles down through sternocleidomastoid. One of the very simple ways we can do is massage sternocleidomastoid, right? STM, right? So we can kind of go up to where we can feel it, and it's really thick. Do you remember that beautiful grace? I mean, I just remember this so much working with cadavers, that it was just such a beautiful muscle, right? And you just kind of grab it and hook onto it and go from side to side. And you'll start to feel like a vagal response, a softening in the system. Now, I personally also love to do some mandible work because, as we know, the jaw is really related to the pelvic floor. So when I have clients coming in who I think could benefit from vagal nerve stimulation, release, right, and they have a hypertonic pelvic floor, giving them some mandible massage is also really great, right? And just a quick reminder of how you find it. If you're not sure where it is, just place your fingers on your cheeks, the side of your face, and open and close your jaw. Where you feel the hinge happening, that's your mandible, right? So you can do some massaging. Quick side note, this mandible, if you were to draw a line between these two parts and put the roof of your tongue, the tongue up to the roof of your mouth, that intersection is where C1 is. Really interesting, right? That's where C1 is. And we just talked about that basic exercise where it helps give blood flow back into the brainstem at C1. Well, there we go, right? So now bringing it full circle, maybe after you do the basic exercise, you go in, you do a little bit of mandible work, right? A little bit of circling there, a little bit of release on STM, right? So this is great. Now, remember, we also talked about it going into the viscera, right? Having that vagal nerve dive into the viscera. So, doing abdominal massage, huge, 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 huge in stimulating the vagal nerve. So, vagus nerve. So, even if you're trained in visceral mobilization, awesome. Even if you're not, if you've done any of the mind abdominal massage work, awesome. Or really, like, what about the I love you massage for constipation? Like, it's that simple, right? Pull from your toolbox. Abdominal massage is fantastic for vagal nerve stimulation. Another big one is singing, right? Leanne, I'm so glad you're excited. I'm so glad you're here. So singing, humming, right? That vibratory. So I don't know if Phaedra Antioco is joining us, but she is a somatic experiencing practitioner who studied with Stephen Levine, and he talks so much about vibration and singing and humming, calming the nervous system, right? So a couple things we could do is like this simple right? There's something to that in yoga class. Also doing something like a ah, and that's where you really want to let the back of the throat stretch, right? So ah, and give into that vibration, right? So this is something that you really want to encourage people to do, and they're not shy or self-conscious, right? So some private time in the shower behind a closed door, right? Because you just really don't want to feel judged or self-aware. You just want to do it. And let that parasympathetic nervous system surface. Another one is ooh, right? That having your lips kind of create a sphere in front of the teeth. Ooh, and those, if you just do that, ooh, those are really stimulating 3 different places in the mouth, 3 different parts of the tongue, right? So that trio is really, really beautiful. I don't know if you guys are into Jill Miller's yoga tune-up stuff, but she has so much about using her gorgeous ball and like rolling out the neck and sternocleidomastoid, and like all of her stuff she often refers to, you know, stimulating the vagus nerve. So she's another really great resource. I'll add her to the comment section. So Jill Miller, great resources for self-exercise, right? So that's the other part of this that we want to remember, is that the goal is to have our clients become active operators of their own system, right? And so when we do that, we're giving them these exercises, right? We're giving them self-care rituals and routines that enable them to be in charge of their nervous system, right? So crucial, so crucial. So giving them these resources. Already so many of our fellow OTs have mentioned some incredible resources. This is the stuff that we want to turn over to them, right? This is the stuff that we want to empower them with and give them so that they can start to treat themselves and pick up on when their nervous system needs that down regulation, right? That central sensitivity is such an opportunity to re-educate our clients. Melissa, welcome. So glad you're here. Okay, so I'd love to open up the floor now. Of course, you guys are always welcome to talk, but that's kind of the end of my prepared conversation, the stuff that I really wanted to share with each of you. What questions do you guys have? What are you guys doing? What are you using? What population are you working with, right? Thanks, Alyssa. I love self-care routines for our clients as well. I think that's so vital. So what populations do you know about polyvagal, right? What have you read? What have you done? What have you thought about? What have you played around with? Talk to me. Let me know. I'll just hang out for a few minutes, and actually let me, while I'm waiting for you guys to bring up any questions or anything that you'd like to share, I'm going to go back in and take a look at Bryn's comments because she had a really good one. Of course, I can't find it now. Oh, that's weird. I just went on my phone and saw my live. Super weird. Okay, So Bryn's comment, and Bryn, if you're still there, if you're with us, you can if you don't mind, repost your question. Okay, here we go. I found it. Fabulous. So she says, I'm interested in, is there a link between high tone post-traumatic is there a link between high tone post-traumatic brain injury and this theory? Does anyone know that? I do not know the answer. I do not have any experience with brain injury. Can anyone answer that for Brid? She's reading about the polyvagal theory. She thought about the similarity between body tension experienced in the fight or flight response and the high tone experienced in post-traumatic brain injury, right? Such a great question. Given that this client group has experienced serious trauma, could there be use for polyvagal in acquired brain injury? All right. Who can answer that question? What are you guys' thoughts on that? I wish I could add some color there. I'd love it. So if anyone has experience in that, please post, even if it's in the replay. Megan says, I will use some craniosacral with someone at the beginning of the session who seems to be in fight or flight. Awesome. Occipital cranial base release and dural tube release, which connects to sacrum. I also do a lot of abdominal massage. Megan, what I would do to be able to have you be my therapist. I mean, I think your background is just so incredible. Yeah, and I think using Stanley's exercise and assessments, easy for you. Just folding that into your vast knowledge, is going to be a game changer for you. Okay, so Britt says, thanks to asking everyone. Interested to hear their responses. I am too. So again, the question is about brain injury and use of polyvagal. While we're waiting on that, there's another part that she brings up in her question, which I really love. And she says she's interested how the move to online therapy will affect people using polyvagal theory. Will it affect our ability to create a safe therapeutic environment for our client? So will this affect treatment? I love that question. So to be completely honest with you, yeah. Functional pelvis does house calls for that reason. I mean, I know, right, Dana? I want Megan to be my therapist too. She's so incredible. Dana, you are too. You guys are all amazing. So I do house calls, and one of the reasons why was I saw when I was doing home care, just the ease and the comfort and how the transition of let's make this applicable to you and your life and not have you do it in this fluorescent light gym and then have you expect to figure out how to draw the connection in your home environment. Already, that was such a draw for me. And so I've also just seen how much more comfortable they are at ease, right? So when I walk in, I work with a lot of pre and postnatal people, and when I walk in and let's say they're feeding their baby, they're in their favorite chair, the chair they're probably spending most of their day in, and I'm seeing their natural posture, right? There's no performance, there's no, we're seeing it in real time. And so to me, that's so incredibly valuable because we're able to really help them in that moment, and they're feeling safe because we're meeting them literally where they are. So I absolutely agree with you. I think the online therapy aspect and the aspect that if they're at all anticipatory and nervous about doing internal work, we've had so many clients in the functional pelvis contact us because they know we can't do internal work through virtual telehealth. They just weren't ready for that aspect of it, but they wanted to figure out what was going on in their pelvic floor. So if you guys have seen the In Their Hands course that I created for OTs on using a script and figuring out how to help people do their own self-assessment virtually, we did that, and it's so empowering because they're in control and they choose the way that they want to do it, and it makes a world of difference. So I absolutely think that it changes. It's a game changer. So thank you for bringing that up. Erica says craniosacral dural tube, John Barnes myofascial, rebounding, inner dialogue work, and hemp oil. Fantastic. Erica, I'm not familiar with rebounding. Would you mind? I know it's hard to do in typing, but just kind of give us a sense or give me a sense. I'm sorry that I don't know about it, what work that is. I'd love to hear just a little something. Dana says, let's trade because I want you to work on me. Yep, me too. And Dana says, yes, she's down for it. Awesome. So I'm guessing that no one on the live right now is familiar with brain injury and polyvagal. So I am sorry, Brid, that we aren't able to have a conversation about that. But if anyone on the replay is familiar, please post. We'll catch it. Make sure to tag Brid in it so she can follow back up on the comments, because I'm super curious about that. Erica says she loves John Barnes' myofascial stuff with this. The session is resonating so much with her clients post head and neck cancer. Again, connecting the dots across populations is so cool for me. I 100% agree. I really do love that aspect of our work and of you guys. I mean, your backgrounds and your talent is so vast and so incredibly beautiful that I love seeing that through the work that you're doing as OTs. It's so impressive. Okay. Guys, I'm so thankful and appreciative for your time. Does anyone have any other questions or any other comments that they want to bring up about this really lovely topic? I'm going to also just repeat the amazing recommendations that everyone had. So we've got Ginger Garner, right? We have Melanie Weller, Michelle Emanuel as it relates to infants. We have Eddie Stearns, One Simple Thing. We have Stanley Rosenberg's book, Accessing the Healing Power of the Vagus Nerve. Jill Miller. And I think that's what we've got so far. And I loved hearing about everybody and what they're doing in their practice. So fantastic, guys. I thank you so much for your time and for being here and for helping me learn. I love this. Look forward to seeing you next Wednesday for the next OT Empower Hour. Feel free to DM me or email me if you have any specific suggestions on what you want to cover. I did a poll and I got a general idea of what you guys want me to talk about, but you know, specifics are always really nice because I'm happy. I love doing all of this stuff, but I want to make it really relevant for you and really make it worth your time. So email me, DM me, let me know if you have any specific ideas. Erica says it's one of, John Barnes' triad. So it's MFR release, unwinding, and rebounding. Okay, where you're essentially jiggling the body to get cells to rebound off of one another to facilitate the rehydrating of cells and release holding patterns. It's a terrible definition. No, it's not. That's really helpful. This with Lisa, I'm so glad. Yes, it was really great to have everybody's resources. Brid says, no worries. I love hearing about what you guys do in the States. I'm so inspired by it. I learned about it all from training as a yoga teacher, and I found yourself through all of my searches after it. It's a Pandora's box. It certainly is. The Embodiment Podcast. I do love that one. Okay, great. Yet another resource, guys. Embodiment Podcast. That's a really good one. Awesome. All right, guys. Have a wonderful week. Thank you for joining me, and stay in touch. You guys are awesome. Talk to you soon.